A doctor faces 25 murder counts, and Tim Ryan gains a little traction in his race for president. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Joe Ingles, State House reporter for Ohio Public Radio, Jim Siegel, State House reporter for the Columbus Dispatch, Derek Clay, Democratic strategist, and Mehek Cook, Republican strategist. Mount Carmel and Dr. William Husel have faced civil and regulatory penalties for months. This week, the criminal justice system came down hard on the doctor, accused of giving fatal overdoses of drugs to more than 24 patients. Dr. Husel faces 25 counts of murder in the deaths of 25 Mount Carmel patients who received excessive doses of fentanyl, doses that investigators say prematurely ended their lives even if they were near death.
I likened it to the burning down of a candle. That candle, while there may just be a ½ inch of wax left, if I blow that candle out, I'm causing that flame to go out sooner than it would naturally.
Mount Carmel has identified 9 other patients who died after receiving excessive doses under Husel's orders. O'Brien says Husel does not face charges in those cases because they received lower doses than the other 25. Jim Siegel, this is an extraordinary case, 25 murder counts. The number alone only, enhances the question is how did this happen in a major hospital?
Well, obviously I wasn't there,
Yeah.
so it's hard to say specifically, but based on what we know, I mean, I would have to say there's probably definitely some dereliction of duty among some of those around him, supervisors, nurses, pharmacists, others. But at the same time, he was doing things to kind of cover his tracks. I mean, he is a doctor. He is the one who's supposed to know. He is, you do not go to a doctor and expect them to do anything even remotely close to this kind of thing.
Do no harm, yeah.
Do no harm. But he would issue emergency orders for drugs, which would allow him to kind of get around the pharmacist check. And frankly, these were not patients coming in for appendicitis or something of more minor procedures who were suddenly dying, in their beds. I mean, these were folks, most of whom were near death anyway. And I just don't know that there was enough folks who were really paying, enough attention. I mean, when, he didn't walk up and stab them.
Yeah.
It just wasn't, I guess, just wasn't obvious enough, even though he was giving them doses of these drugs that experts say there is absolutely no medical basis for someone to ever get these kind of doses. And you would have thought at some point somebody a little sooner would have said, hey, something's wrong here.
It did occur, he was the overnight doctor, but still. It goes to intent, and there's no confession that we know of. There's no other evidence. So it goes to his intent as a doctor, and he claims through his attorney that he never meant to euthanize anybody. Is this a tough case to prove, Derek?
Well, you got 25 cases out there that are pending right now. This is a travesty to those victims, but in some cases it may be a little tough to prove. We know that a number of those patients were near death, and then there was maybe 4 or 5 cases in which the patients could have been saved, but I think the public opinion is out right now, and it doesn't look good for the doctor, and it certainly doesn't look good for Mount Carmel.
Nurses, Mehek, pharmacists were not charged here. Ron O'Brien, the prosecutor, said that they're treated as witnesses. Some say that they bear some responsibility, perhaps even criminal responsibility, for not catching this, putting a red flag, reporting this doctor up the chain.
Mm-hmm. So look, I think clearly this doctor is a monster, and the way that he conducted himself, he was constantly overriding hospital procedures. There should have been an immediate red flag when you had a pharmacist that was dispensing the amount of fentanyl. I mean, it was between 500 micrograms to 2,000. The second you do that, there needs to be a red flag, an independent review to ensure that this is okay. We should have caught this in the first month. So this is not only heartbreaking for families, and some people say, yes, they were end-of-life care, but it doesn't matter whether you're conscious or unconscious. When you come to a hospital, you deserve the same duty of care as any other patient.
Joe, anything at the State House? I know with the Strauss case at Ohio State, there's been legislation passed about statutes of limitations and investigations into the medical board by the governor's office. Has there been any fallout from this case,
There's been
legislatively?
talk.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk about it. Nothing formal that's in committee yet in a bill form, but I would be expecting something soon.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's a little too early to put together some state legislation just because of the nature of the case and where it is right now. But I think you're definitely going to see many pieces of legislation that are going to address this and the breakdown of where this doctor was and then the processes that were just not adhered to during the course of these people's lives.
I mean, this is something you really don't want to just knee-jerk legislate this kind of a situation. I mean, we're talking about medical care and situations that, again, it's not as if this is the third or fourth doctor we've caught doing this kind of thing in the last 20 years. I mean, this, you don't want to start implementing a bunch of new regulations and rules and hoops that folks have to jump through if it's really not going to be necessary. And especially if it really does just come down to the fact that some people just weren't paying enough attention. Because I can't imagine that there was anything stopping folks who saw that he asked for 1,000 micrograms of fentanyl, that somebody couldn't have said no.
Yeah.
When did we start admitting elephants to the ER? And so I don't know what they may do, but I'm sure that at some point my hope is that they sit down with the doctors, they sit down with the hospitals, and they determine if there is some places that there are holes in the system that maybe they fill them, but they don't just knee-jerk legislate for political purposes.
Even just whistleblower rules and laws to help protect folks who want to question folks of higher authority. Anyway, Ohio House Speaker Larry Householder is a tough politician, not one to back down from a fight, and this week he took on two unlikely opponents, librarians and drag queens. It all began when libraries in Delaware and Newark planned to offer drag queen art programs in conjunction with LGBT Pride Month. The event sparked some minor protests, but Larry Householder took it to another level. He wrote a scathing letter to the Ohio Library Council denouncing the programs, calling them a stunningly bizarre breach of the public trust. And he noted, in the middle of the budget season, the state spends $400 million a year on libraries. The Newark Library canceled its event. The Delaware drag event moved to another location down the street. The Library Council defended the program, saying libraries should not discriminate. Joe Ingles, you went to the alternate event in Delaware. It was at a comic book store.
Right.
200 people showed up.
Right.
Would they have gotten that many people if it weren't for Larry Householder's letter?
I don't think they might. I think it really kind of was a whirlwind that, kind of came together. And a lot of people were really upset about it because they see this as, someone being heavy-handed with the libraries and that the libraries should be for everyone and that no one should, and there are a lot of things that happen in libraries, a lot of programming that happens in libraries, and not everyone's going to like all programs. So that was something we heard a lot from people.
Why did he pick this fight? Mac, why do you think he picked this fight?
Look, I don't think this is about Larry Householder versus drag queens. I think this is about the use of public institutions. And as an attorney, I look at this as under the Constitution, we have freedom of speech. But I do want to ask the question, if we were giving an alternate right group the ability to show how to conduct an abortion or what an abortion looks like, would we be okay with our kids seeing something like that? So I really think we need to get back to mainstream and the norm. What are public libraries intended to be used for? And then how do we protect our kids? This is really about protecting our children and ensuring that there's sexualization that isn't occurring on any level from any group.
These were art programs. I mean, they argued that there was nothing. They have drag queen story hours at other libraries, and it's just theatrical, it's just a performance, there's nothing really to protect kids from.
Well, but one of the
Viewpoint.
courses, I apologize, one of the courses was teaching sex ed, and you really want somebody who's qualified teaching programming like that. So again, what's the use of our public institutions? Is it really intended for this type of discussion? And if it is, I'm open to it. I'm open to diverse viewpoints, I'm open to diverse ideas. We just need to use common sense and get back to mainstream.
Well, I was going to add to that. I mean, I think you're right in some aspects of that, of what you said, but I think that libraries are for everyone, and they're a place for discovery, and they're a place for learning, and not a place for discrimination. Kicking groups out of libraries for for what they believe, I think really sets a bad precedent, because libraries are free and open to the public. They're a place where you can learn about a plethora of different things. I mean, there's books in the library about, drag queens and sex education and even alt-right. So I think that, you know, our libraries definitely need to be looked upon in that fashion.
But is there a line? You wouldn't allow a hate group to reserve a room. Is there a line? Where is that line? There has to be a line somewhere, wouldn't you say?
Well, you know, the drag queen who was featured, who was hosting this, I asked, you know, what does this course entail? And it was a history of drag, and drag is art, as an art form in
This is the one in
theater.
Delaware, yeah.
Right. It was makeup and hair and, you know, things that drag queens often get asked about. There wasn't anything sexual involved with the particular presentation that was being made that day.
Mike, I'll go back to your initial question. Why did Larry Householder pick this fight? It's because the people in Larry Householder's district, and my guess is the majority of people in most of his the districts of the Republicans in his chamber are on his side for this. I would say that if you took a poll out there and said, should the public libraries be used to host these types of events involving teenagers and drag queens and such, I would guess most of the Republican districts, you'd come back with poll results that show that are heavily against that, right or wrong. But I think when you ask why he picked it, I think it's because it's a fight. I think he thinks he's on the right side in the districts that he and his members represent.
You can, the strength of the letter, I think what got the attention. You could make a call, but
Well, but I think he was extending his First Amendment freedom of speech, and he did not shut this program down. He is somebody who expressed his viewpoint, and the libraries decided that they were going to pull the programming. So
he
I don't
asked for them
think
to be shut down in the letter. Yeah, he called for them to be
right, but
stopped.
that's his right. He's exercising his First Amendment, and I'm open to both sides and diverse viewpoints. But I think both sides were expressing different views, and unfortunately, they moved to a different location, and I think that's great. There are private residences, there are businesses that are open to this type of discussion and activity.
The one thing that the drag queens and the people who support him say is that oftentimes people who speak out in the way that Householder did, that's kind of a code for a certain level of hate that they don't like, that shouldn't be evident in that culture. And indeed, the reason that the Delaware County Library decided to cancel that event was they said that they received threats. So
Yeah, Larry Householder didn't start the
Right.
protests.
Right,
but
he did not.
But he obviously threw considerable weight behind it, though. You know, especially when he's got a $400 million a year budget behind him. That, you know, it matters a lot when Larry Householder says, you know, you need to stop.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Small business people, sole proprietors who make up to $250,000 a year may get to keep their state tax break. The Senate comes out with its version of the budget soon, and senators seem inclined to restore that tax break, which the House budget reduced. Governor DeWine wants to keep the tax break, saying businesses want to see stability. Mehek Cook, at most, this tax break gets $10,000 to $12,000 a year. It's supposed to be for job creators. There's not a whole lot of jobs being created at that kind of saving, $12,000. Is it worth the tax break for these folks?
Well, I think Ohio businesses just want stability. And when you're looking at small business and entrepreneurs, that's their bread and butter. They want a stable environment in Ohio. And I support reduction of taxes as long as the intent is kept. So yes, it's creating jobs, it's reinvesting in the community, or reinvesting in their own businesses. And I actually just saw a report today in terms of tax collections. To date, we're $1 billion ahead in terms of collections than the same time last year. So we've been doing a great job in this state in terms of economy, jobs, creation. So we really need to slow this process down and have a comprehensive approach in terms of our businesses actively contributing to the economy, creating jobs. We don't want to penalize them. We're a pro-growth state.
Derek?
I'm surprised that the Republicans are even talking about cutting taxes for small business, because small business is really their base.
Well, the House wanted to increase taxes.
I'm sorry about that. But small businesses are the GOP's base. So I was surprised to see that. But as Mehek said, small businesses are very, very important to this economy, and we have to make sure that these businesses are contributing to the growth of our state.
Larry Householder likes this eliminating of the tax break anyway.
Well, he's rolling it back to 100. And I just to correct something you said earlier, you said it was up to about 10 or 12,000. That's only for the $250,000 deduction.
Then there's a break after
the
that.
actual biggest break, which most people don't want to talk about, is the fact that they get a 40% tax cut above $250,000.
Right.
That can save you tens of thousands of dollars for people who are in the top 1% of tax filers in the state.
So you could use those to create jobs if it's tens of thousands of dollars.
And if you're making $3 million already, can't you already afford to hire somebody if you want to? And that's a key question, because a key question here is the tax fairness. Someone making under the current law, someone making $60,000 is paying the same tax as someone making $300,000 if they have that $300,000 in business income. Is that fair? Especially when there's nothing in the law that says that person making $300,000 has to have any employees at all. It could, or plan to hire anyone. It could be, and 34% of those who file more than $250,000 in business income tax live out of state. They don't even live in Ohio. So, there's a lot there's a lot of debate about where we should set that mark. But there's also there seems to be a lot of good reason why we shouldn't leave it the way it is, because those who support it, including a number of Republicans in the House, basically say we're just giving money away to everybody without any real goal here, and it just doesn't seem to be working the way we intended.
And before the legislature actually put these breaks into action a few years ago, before that time, there were some studies that showed that it wasn't really going to spur job creation. And Larry Householder, sees those. He also sees the studies right now coming out, and they're coming from more liberal-leaning groups. But they're saying there's no job creation. And if you think about some of the people who are taking advantage of this, it's attorneys. It's people who have a one-person business. They're taking advantage of these breaks.
Do you see a compromise? Tie it to jobs. If you're going to get this break, this big tax break that Jim was just talking about, above and beyond the $250,000, you can get the break, but you got to say, okay, I've created one job. Two jobs.
I think metrics are always great, especially because I feel statements don't really do anything in terms of what we think we're doing in terms of the state. So if we tie it to metric in terms of jobs or how we're reinvesting in the community, I think that's great. And I think that's something the Senate has talked about looking at. But to roll it back right now when businesses have depended on this, when they're the bread and butter and foundation of our economy, it just doesn't make sense. I think we need to be a little slower and methodical in this.
That always prompts the question that during a recession, politicians always say this is the worst time for a tax hike. So isn't the booming times a good time for tax hike?
No, I really think tax reform can't be a knee-jerk reaction. We have to slow down and see how is this impacting businesses. Businesses should not feel that they're being penalized. The reason companies come to Ohio is because we're pro-growth and pro-economy. We don't want to penalize them by saying we're going to now push back our taxes that we've given you and those incentives. And I haven't seen data yet to say that we don't have enough job growth or reinvestment in the community. When we have that, we should have that discussion.
And just remember who we're talking about here. The House passed plan still allows for $100,000. You make up to $100,000, you pay no income tax. That covers 86% of the current business tax filers. We're talking about the 14% who are the wealthiest 14% of those filers. And again, a number of them are out of state. And there's, so that's who we're fighting over. The vast majority of people who currently get the business tax break would continue to get it under the House plan.
It's not a huge pot of money, but it's symbolic of the tax fairness issue.
Actually, it is a huge pot
Is
of
it
money.
really?
The total tax break is about $1.2 billion a year.
Okay, well, that's
and
not
this would
change.
slice off about $530 million of that in a tax increase. But again, $530 million, that's going to 14% of the highest earning filers.
All right. Congressman Tim Ryan of Northeast Ohio continues his long shot run for president. The Youngstown area Democrat barely registers in the polls. He's at 1 or 2%. This week, CNN offered him one of their town halls. Among other things, Ryan said we can reverse climate change and revive the Rust Belt.
We can reverse climate. Let's talk about it in the context of jobs. Solar's growing at 30% a year. Wind's growing at 20% a year. We're going to make 30 million electric vehicles in the next 10 years. I want those made in the United States, and let's steer the investment to the communities that have lost, communities of color, old coal, old steel, old auto, old rubber.
Clay, what do you make of that message? Progressive, but job creating, Rust Belt, Midwestern?
Well, I think it's a good message, but the question is it going to get lost in the message that every other Democratic nominee for president is running on? You know, everybody's running on innovation and jobs and protecting the worker, but is it going to be enough to resonate and cut through all of the different messages that's out there already?
He's registering in the polls. He will make the debate. As of right now, he would make the first debates coming up later this month that the CNN is sponsoring. But, you know, it's 23, 24 candidates, and Joe Biden's there, and it's going to be tough.
Well, and Tim Ryan looks like he's really fighting for air at this point in a very crowded primary, and he's not polling well even in his own district. Trump is far exceeding him in terms of poll numbers. So I think he needs to focus on his district before he loses that seat. And he's not understanding the pulse of the community, and his community and his constituents are far more conservative than where he is today.
Do we see him December 1st as the deadline to file papers to run for Congress re-election? So that's the date he has to look at. And it's a long way off, but that's the date. If he's not going to run, he can't run for both. So you got to pick one.
Right.
Right.
I think he'll be filing papers for Congress.
Well, I mean, look, he's got a good, you know, he's a good politician. He's got a good personality. He's got a good message for a Democratic primary. The problem is he's at 2%. I mean, I saw a media study here in the last week. They counted up the number of times each candidate's name was mentioned on cable and broadcast news. And I think Biden was at 1,600 and he was at 6.
Oh, wow.
And so, I mean, he's just not getting traction. And how can you in a field of this size when you're a, you know, relatively unknown congressman out of Ohio?
Fields of this size typically favor the person who has the most name recognition. If you look back at the Republican primary, Donald Trump had the name recognition going into that, and he always did very well just because of that. So.
Derek, when I listened to that soundbite, he's talking about bring the jobs back to old coal, old steel, old rubber. He's talking about Ohio cities. Is this just to boost his profile, and he could use that same soundbite running against Rob Portman in a few years?
Old coal, old steel.
Old rubber. So basically,
Old rubber.
bring the new energy jobs to Youngstown,
Right.
Akron, and, you know, Southeast Ohio.
Right. I mean, again, it goes back to, you know, is he going to cut through what everybody else is saying? Because right now, you know, you got 20 plus candidates that are running for president, and his district is struggling. I mean, they just lost the Lordstown plant, you know. I mean, those are the things that his constituents are concerned about, and we can talk about those things, but unless you're really in the mix, you know, like a Joe Biden, like a Kamala Harris, that people are really listening to, then I don't know if what he's saying is being listened to.
He went slow on impeachment, kind of. He said it's time for the House to begin moving towards impeachment, which is really a kind of a non-answer. A little closer than Nancy Pelosi, perhaps, but that's a way to at least get some attention anyway.
Well, all the Democrats want attention on that issue. There's no legal basis for impeachment, so we need to really stop dragging this out and focus on what really matters, which is jobs, the economy, and just move forward.
Is that what is the thinking as far as the Democrat goes on this impeachment? Should they go for it, or should they see what these other investigations?
Now, this is just my own personal opinion. I think impeachment would be the worst thing that could happen to the Democratic Party right now, going into this 2020 election. I think that, you know, people are a little bit fed up with all the ongoing investigations. They want to see progress in the country with how we're moving forward with jobs and the economy and innovation. And I think that if we're not talking about those types of things and we continue to keep this message on impeaching Trump, then I think that we're going to be in trouble.
All right, let's get to our off-the-record final parting shots. Mehek, you're up first.
I think that Franklin County conservatives win back the district in 2020.
Which district?
All Franklin County seats that we lost as Republicans.
Okay. At the state level, the state house level.
State level and judicial races.
Okay. Derek.
Ohio Legislative Black Caucus Foundation is having their state conference on June 21st. It's a free event, and Governor DeWine, Speaker Householder, Emilia Sykes, our minority leader, and Joyce Beatty will all be featured.
Interesting. Jim.
Well, I don't think the Cupp-Patterson school funding plan, which is the big plan that would reform the entire system of funding, is going to make it into the budget. But expect the Senate to make some changes here in the next few days that will potentially impact some districts, including those that are currently under the cap, which means they're not getting nearly as much as they should be getting under the current formula. But this debate is far from over because Cupp-Patterson is going to be put into a separate bill.
That's dropped off the radar in recent months anyway. Joe.
I think we're starting to see a little bit of frustration among people who are entrenched on issues, who have issues that they want brought to the State House. I'm seeing, we've heard people talk about, oh, let's put abortion on the ballot. People have talked about putting guns on the ballot. There's all kinds of things out there. I think we're going to see more of that because people think the government is broken.
All right. It is that time again. It's time for beer. We're hosting another Politics and a Pint event next Thursday evening. Ann Fisher and I will talk politics with experts and with you as we sip some craft beer. It's at Wolf's Ridge Brewing. It's downtown this coming Thursday, June 13th at 6:30. Join us, get there early, and we'll find something to talk about, I'm sure. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Please check us out online. We're on Facebook and Twitter where you can continue the conversation. And if you miss an episode or you just want to relive this experience, you can get each episode on demand at our website at wosu.org/COTR. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.